The blazing Arizona sun beat down on the dusty streets of Skidoo as Temperance Valentine clutched her worn leather satchel to her chest, wondering how she'd ever find the strength to survive another day in this God-forsaken place. It was 1876, and the promise of a new life in the West had turned into a nightmare she couldn't escape until today. Temperance's honey-brown hair was pinned tightly beneath her bonnet as she stood on the wooden platform outside the gilded cage, the notorious brothel where she'd been indentured for the past 7 months. Her throat tightened as she watched a tall figure approach on horseback, knowing what his arrival meant. Nathan Zephyr, the infamous cattle baron whose ranch sprawled across the valley, had paid Madame Rosaline an exorbitant sum for Temperance's exclusive company for the night. "There he is," hissed Madame Rosaline, her bejeweled fingers digging into Temperance's shoulder. "Remember our arrangement. He's paid handsomely for you. Do whatever he asks." Temperance nodded numbly, her green eyes fixed on the approaching cowboy. Nathan Zephyr's reputation preceded him, a hard man, they said, but fair in his dealings. Unlike other men who frequented the gilded cage, he rarely visited town except for business. What business he had with her, Temperance could only imagine with mounting dread. He dismounted with fluid grace that belied his tall frame, tying his Palomino stallion to the hitching post. His face, partially obscured by his wide-brimmed Stetson, was weathered by sun and wind. As he approached, Temperance caught a glimpse of piercing blue eyes beneath the hat's brim. "Miss Valentine," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep and smooth like aged whiskey. "Mr. Zephyr," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your things are ready as we discussed," Madame Rosaline interjected, pushing a small carpet bag forward. "Everything's arranged." Nathan nodded curtly, taking the bag and securing it to his saddle before turning back to Temperance. "Can you ride?" "Yes," she answered, though it had been years since she'd been on horseback. He offered his hand, helping her mount behind him. The leather of his vest was warm against her cheek as she reluctantly wrapped her arms around his waist. With a flick of the reins, they were moving away from the gilded cage, away from Skidoo, into the vast expanse of desert and mountain that surrounded the small mining town. They rode in silence for over an hour, the town disappearing behind them as they followed a trail into the foothills. Temperance's mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. She'd heard stories of men who paid for privacy, only to indulge in violent fantasies away from prying eyes. Finally, as they crested a ridge overlooking a lush valley, Nathan brought his horse to a stop. In the distance, Temperance could see a sprawling ranch house, barns and corrals, the legendary Zephyr Ranch. "This is far enough," Nathan said, dismounting and helping her down. Temperance's legs trembled, partly from the long ride and partly from fear. She stood tall, summoning what dignity she had left. "You paid for me. Now finish it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's brow furrowed as he removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with a touch of silver at the temples. He was older than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his mid-30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. "Finish it," he repeated, confusion evident in his tone. "Whatever it is you brought me out here to do," Temperance clarified, her chin lifting defiantly despite the tremor in her voice. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked remarkably like sadness. "Miss Valentine, I believe you've misunderstood my intentions." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded document, handing it to her. Temperance opened it with shaking fingers, squinting at the legal text in the fading light. "It's your indenture contract," Nathan explained. "I purchased it from Madame Rosaline this morning." Temperance's heart sank. So she'd simply been transferred from one owner to another. "I see," she said flatly. "No, I don't think you do." Nathan stepped back, giving her space. "I'm offering you your freedom, Miss Valentine. The contract is yours to do with as you please. Burn it if you like." Temperance stared at him, disbelief warring with fragile hope. "My freedom? But why?" Nathan's gaze turned toward the valley. "Let's just say I'm settling an old debt." He gestured toward the trail that continued past the ridge. "My ranch is about 3 miles that way. There's a position open for a housekeeper if you're interested. Fair wages, your own quarters." Or he pointed to another trail leading west that will take you to the main road to Tucson. "The choice is yours." Temperance clutched the contract, her mind reeling. "I don't understand." "You paid for me, but you're letting me go. No one should own another person, Miss Valentine." Nathan's voice was firm. "I'm simply righting a wrong." "But why me?" Temperance pressed, suspicious of this unexpected kindness. Nathan hesitated, then reached into his vest pocket, withdrawing a faded tintype photograph. He handed it to her reluctantly. Temperance gasped as she looked at the image of a young woman with her own eyes staring back at her. "My sister," he explained quietly. "Annabelle. She disappeared 10 years ago. We later learned she'd been sold to a brothel in Santa Fe." His jaw tightened. "By the time I found her, it was too late. Consumption had taken her." Understanding flooded through Temperance. "I remind you of her." "You have her eyes," he acknowledged. "When I saw you in town last week, I couldn't just ride away." Temperance handed back the photograph, her heart aching for this man and the sister he'd lost. "I'm sorry about Annabelle." Nathan tucked the photo away. "So am I." He cleared his throat. "The offer stands. A job at my ranch or the road to Tucson. Either way, you're a free woman now." Temperance looked down at the contract in her hands, then at the 2 paths before her. Freedom was a terrifying prospect after months of having every decision made for her. Where would she go? How would she survive? "The housekeeper position," she said finally. "I'd like to accept it. For now." Nathan nodded, his expression unreadable. "For now," he agreed, helping her back onto his horse. "Just so we're clear, Miss Valentine, the job is just that, a job. Your duties extend to cooking, cleaning, and keeping house. Nothing more." Relief washed over her. "I understand, Mr. Zephyr." As they rode toward the ranch house, Temperance allowed herself to breathe freely for the first time in months. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, she had been given something precious: choice. The Zephyr Ranch was more impressive up close. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of sturdy timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Outbuildings, corrals, and barns spread across the property in neat arrangement. Several cowboys paused in their evening chores to watch as Nathan rode in with Temperance. "This is where you'll be staying," Nathan said, leading her to a small but well-built cabin about 50 yards from the main house. The previous housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, moved to California last month to live with her daughter. She kept things tidy. The cabin was indeed tidy, with a comfortable-looking bed, a small wood stove, a writing desk, and a rocking chair by the window. A small bookshelf held a few worn volumes. "Bathrooms out back," Nathan explained. "Kitchen and pantry are in the main house. Breakfast is at dawn, dinner at sunset. The men take their lunch in the bunkhouse or out on the range." "How many men work here?" Temperance asked, setting down her meager belongings. 15 regular hands, more during roundup. My foreman, Jackson, runs the day-to-day operations." Nathan paused at the door. "Get settled in. Come to the main house when you're ready, and I'll introduce you to Mrs. Callahan. She does the cooking now, but she'll be grateful for the help." Left alone, Temperance sank onto the bed, overwhelmed. Just hours ago, she'd been preparing herself for whatever degradation Nathan Zephyr might demand. Now she had a cabin of her own and the promise of honest work. She washed her face in the basin, smoothed her hair, and changed into the plainest of the 3 dresses she owned. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the main house, her mind racing with questions about her new employer. What kind of man purchased a woman's freedom without expecting anything in return? Mrs. Callahan turned out to be a plump, cheerful woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and capable hands. She welcomed Temperance warmly into the spacious kitchen. "Thank the Lord you're here," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "These cowboys eat like they're never seeing food again, and my old bones can't keep up with them anymore." "I'm happy to help," Temperance said sincerely, "though I should warn you my cooking skills are limited." "We'll fix that," Mrs. Callahan assured her. "Can you make coffee without burning it?" "Yes, madam." "Then you're already ahead of half the men on this ranch." As they prepared dinner beef stew, cornbread, and apple cobbler, Temperance gathered the courage to ask about Nathan. "Mr. Zephyr seems unusual." Mrs. Callahan shot her a knowing look. "That he is. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His father built this ranch from nothing, and Nathan's doubled its size since taking over 10 years ago." "He mentioned his sister," Temperance ventured. Mrs. Callahan's expression sobered. "Annabelle, sweet girl, breaking his heart, losing her the way he did changed him." She lowered her voice. "He blames himself, you know. She ran away after a terrible fight with their father. Nathan was away at the time." "That's awful," Temperance murmured. "It is. But don't you go treating him like he's made of glass. The best thing for Nathan Zephyr is to be treated like any other man." Mrs. Callahan smiled mischievously. "Even if he is the finest man in 3 counties. Dinner was served in the large dining room, where Nathan sat at the head of the table with his foreman and 2 other senior hands. Temperance helped Mrs. Callahan serve, keeping her eyes downcast when she placed Nathan's plate before him. "Thank you, Miss Valentine," he said formally. The meal passed without incident, and afterward, as Temperance helped clear the dishes, Nathan approached her in the kitchen. "Everything satisfactory with your accommodations?" he asked. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Zephyr," he nodded, seeming uncomfortable. "Good. I've instructed the men that you're to be treated with respect. If anyone causes you any trouble, you come to me directly." "I appreciate that." An awkward silence fell between them before he cleared his throat. "Well, good night then." As she walked back to her cabin in the gathering darkness, Temperance tried to reconcile the man she'd just met with the fearsome reputation that preceded him. Nathan Zephyr was not what she'd expected. In the weeks that followed, Temperance settled into life at the Zephyr Ranch. The work was hard but satisfying. She rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast, spent her days cleaning the main house, doing laundry, and assisting Mrs. Callahan with meals. The cowboys were respectful, if a bit shy around her, clearly under strict orders from their boss. Nathan himself remained something of a mystery. He was often gone before sunrise, returning after dark, sometimes disappearing for days to check on distant sections of his vast property. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but distant. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Temperance was in the study dusting the bookshelves when Nathan returned early from his rounds. He stopped short in the doorway, seemingly surprised to find her there. "I'm sorry," Temperance said quickly, moving to leave. "I didn't expect you back so soon." "No need to apologize. It's your job to be here." Nathan removed his hat and gloves, running a hand through his hair. "Actually, I'm glad I caught you. There's something I've been meaning to ask." Temperance waited, her duster clutched in suddenly nervous fingers. "Jackson mentioned you've been teaching young Miguel to read. Is that true?" Miguel was the 12-year-old son of one of the Mexican ranch hands. Temperance had noticed him watching her read on the porch during her rare moments of leisure. "Yes, sir. I hope that's all right. We only practice during my free time." To her surprise, Nathan smiled the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and lighting his blue eyes. "More than all right. It's commendable." He moved to the bookshelf, pulling down a volume. "Has he seen this? It's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, new book just published. I thought it might appeal to a boy his age." Temperance took the book, leafing through its pristine pages. "This is very kind of you, Mr. Zephyr." "Nathan," he corrected, then looked away as if embarrassed by the informality. "When we're not in front of the men, I mean." "Nathan," she repeated softly, "and you must call me Temperance." He nodded, and for a moment, something passed between them, a flicker of connection that made Temperance's heart beat faster. Then the moment was gone, and Nathan was excusing himself to wash up for dinner. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Temperance found herself thinking of that smile, of the way it had revealed a different man beneath the stern exterior. It was dangerous territory, she knew. Nathan Zephyr had saved her, given her a new life, but he was still her employer. She could not afford to develop feelings for him. Yet as the weeks turned into months, such feelings proved impossible to avoid. Every small interaction, every glimpse of the man beneath the stoic rancher's facade drew her closer to him. She learned that he read voraciously, everything from Shakespeare to scientific journals. That he played the violin, though only when he thought no one could hear. That despite his wealth and power, he ate the same food as his hands and never hesitated to work alongside them when needed. For his part, Nathan began to seek out her company, first with transparent excuses, questions about the household accounts, requests for particular meals, then more openly, asking her opinion on books or telling her stories about the ranch's early days. They fell into the habit of sharing coffee on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. It was during one such evening in late September that their careful friendship faced its first test. They were discussing Miguel's progress with reading when the sound of approaching horses interrupted them. Nathan stood, his posture instantly alert as 3 riders appeared in the fading light. "Stay here," he instructed Temperance, his voice tense. Temperance recognized one of the riders immediately, Madame Rosaline, her former employer, flanked by 2 rough-looking men she'd never seen before. Cold fear washed over her. Nathan strode out to meet them, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. Temperance couldn't hear the exchange, but she could see the growing tension in Nathan's shoulders, the way Madame Rosaline gestured emphatically toward the house. Finally, Nathan turned and beckoned to Temperance. Gathering her courage, she walked down the porch steps to join him. "Miss Valentine," Madame Rosaline said, her painted lips curved in an unpleasant smile, "I've come to bring you back to Skidoo." "She's not going anywhere," Nathan stated flatly. "I'm afraid she is. You see, our transaction was incomplete." The madam withdrew a document from her reticule. "This contract clearly states that you purchased one night of Miss Valentine's time, not her entire indenture." Temperance's blood ran cold as Madame Rosaline continued. "You've had her for nearly 4 months now. I believe you owe me substantial compensation for the time she's been absent from my establishment." "The contract was for her freedom," Nathan argued, his voice dangerously low. "We had an agreement. We had a verbal understanding, perhaps, but the written contract says otherwise." Madame Rosaline's smile widened. "Of course, if you're willing to pay the difference." "How much?" Nathan demanded. The sum Madame Rosaline named was staggering, far more than Temperance could ever be worth. She knew what this was: extortion, pure and simple. "This is ridiculous," Temperance interjected, finding her voice. "You know very well what the agreement was." "Careful, my dear," Madame Rosaline warned. "Remember, I still hold power over you legally, unless Mr. Zephyr is willing to pay." "I'll have the money by the end of the week," Nathan said coldly. "Now get off my land." After they'd gone, Temperance turned to Nathan, mortified. "I'm so sorry. I never imagined she would do this." "Don't apologize," Nathan said firmly. "This isn't your fault." "But that amount, it's outrageous. I can't let you pay it." Nathan's expression softened as he looked at her. "What's the alternative?" "Let her take you back to that place." "I could run," Temperance suggested desperately. "Leave Arizona territory altogether, and live as a fugitive." "Always looking over your shoulder," Nathan shook his head. "No, Temperance, I won't let that happen." "But why?" she pressed, needing to understand. "Why would you do this for me?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because in these past months, you've brought something back to this ranch that's been missing for a long time." He turned to look at her, vulnerability plain in his eyes. "You've brought light back into my life." Temperance's heart hammered in her chest. "Nathan, I know it's inappropriate," he continued quickly. "I'm your employer. You're here because I gave you a job, not because you chose to be. I have no right to expect anything from you." "Is that what you think?" Temperance asked softly. "That I'm only here because of the job?" Nathan's eyes searched hers. "Aren't you?" "At first, yes," she admitted. "But now—" She took a deep breath. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else." The confession hung in the air between them, a fragile thing that could shatter with the wrong word. Nathan stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "I'll pay whatever it takes to ensure your freedom," he promised. "Not to keep you here, but so you can truly choose where you want to be." "I've already chosen," Temperance whispered. And as the last light faded from the sky, she rose on tiptoe to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as Nathan pulled her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Temperance saw something she'd never expected to see in Nathan Zephyr's eyes: hope. "We should go inside," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's getting cold." Hand in hand, they walked back to the house, crossing a threshold that had nothing to do with the physical door before them. The next morning, Nathan rode to the bank in the county seat, returning with a lawyer and the funds demanded by Madame Rosaline. Temperance insisted on being present when they met the madam in the neutral territory of the town's only hotel. "The full amount, as requested," Nathan said, placing a heavy pouch on the table. "And this time, we have proper documentation." The lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Hollister, presented a contract that explicitly stated Temperance's indenture was being purchased in full, with no future claims possible. Madame Rosaline counted the money carefully before signing. "A shame to lose such a valuable asset," she remarked, her eyes flicking to Temperance. "But I suppose every bird must leave the nest eventually." "I was never a bird, and that place was never a nest," Temperance replied evenly. "It was a cage. Call it what you will, my dear. We both know what you are." Madame Rosaline gathered her things, pausing at the door. "Enjoy your cowboy while it lasts. Men like him don't marry women like us." The words were meant to wound, and they found their mark. Despite Nathan's declarations, despite the tenderness between them, doubt crept into Temperance's heart. What future could they possibly have? A respected rancher and a former brothel worker. The gossip would be merciless. On the ride back to the ranch, Nathan seemed to sense her withdrawal. "What did she say to you?" he asked when they were alone on the trail. "Nothing that wasn't true," Temperance replied, avoiding his gaze. Nathan brought his horse alongside hers, reaching out to take her hand. "Look at me, Temperance." Reluctantly, she met his eyes. "Whatever she said, whatever doubts she's planted, they're lies. Do you understand? Lies meant to keep you feeling trapped even when you're free." "But people will talk," Temperance argued. "Your reputation, damn my reputation," Nathan interrupted with surprising vehemence. "And damn anyone who would judge you for circumstances beyond your control." His passion silenced her protests, but the seed of doubt remained. That night, for the first time since their kiss, Temperance kept her distance, retreating to her cabin after dinner despite Nathan's questioning look. As October gave way to November, a tense dance developed between them. By day, they maintained a proper employer-employee relationship. But in the evenings, in the privacy of the main house or walking the property at sunset, they couldn't deny the growing connection between them. They talked for hours, shared books and ideas, occasionally stole moments of physical closeness, a touch of hands, a brief kiss before Temperance inevitably pulled away, haunted by Madame Rosaline's parting words. The situation came to a head the night of the first snow. A sudden storm had swept down from the mountains, catching everyone by surprise. Nathan and several of the hands had been out checking on the herd, and Temperance paced the floor of the main house, watching the snow pile up and worrying about their safety. When they finally returned, the men were half frozen, their clothes crusted with ice. Temperance and Mrs. Callahan rushed to prepare hot food and coffee while the ranch hands helped each other strip off frozen layers. Nathan was the last to come in, having ensured all his men were accounted for. His face was pale, his lips blue with cold. "You're freezing," Temperance exclaimed, helping him remove his ice-encrusted coat. "Come, sit by the fire." She brought him coffee laced with whiskey and a bowl of stew, hovering anxiously as color slowly returned to his face. When Mrs. Callahan and the other hands had retired to their quarters, leaving them alone in the main house, Nathan caught Temperance's hand. "I thought I might die out there tonight," he said quietly. "And all I could think about was you." Temperance's heart constricted. "Don't say such things." "Why not?" "It's the truth." Nathan stood, still holding her hand. "Life out here is unpredictable, Temperance. Any day could be our last. Why waste the time we have?" "I'm not the right woman for you," she whispered, voicing the fear that had haunted her for weeks. "You're exactly the right woman for me." Nathan's voice was firm. "The only woman for me. I love you, Temperance Valentine." The words hung in the air, beautiful and terrifying. Temperance looked up into his earnest face and knew she couldn't lie, not to him and not to herself. "I love you too," she admitted. "But loving you and being worthy of you are different things." "Worthy?" Nathan looked genuinely confused. "What does that mean?" "You know what I was," Temperance said, shame coloring her words. "What people will say," understanding dawned in Nathan's eyes. "Is that what's been holding you back?" "What others might think," she nodded miserably. Nathan cupped her face in his hands. "The only opinion that matters is yours. Do you want to be with me, Temperance? Not as my housekeeper, not as someone I rescued, but as my partner, my equal." "Yes," she whispered. "More than anything." "Then the rest is just noise." He kissed her then, a kiss that promised a future she'd never dared to imagine. That night, as the snow continued to fall outside, they made love in front of the fire, tender and passionate in equal measure. Temperance had known men's bodies before, but never like this, never with love, never with this sense of rightness, of coming home. In Nathan's arms, her past fell away, and for the first time she could see a future stretching before her, bright with possibility. Afterward, wrapped in blankets and each other, Nathan spoke of that future. "Marry me," he said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Be my wife." Temperance raised herself on one elbow, searching his face for any hint of doubt. "Are you certain?" "Once you do this, there's no going back. People will talk. Let them talk." Nathan smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Despite her lingering fears, Temperance couldn't deny the joy that flooded through her at his words. "Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you." They planned to marry in the spring, when the mountain passes would be clear enough for Nathan's aunt and cousins to travel from California for the wedding. In the meantime, they kept their engagement private, a precious secret shared only with Mrs. Callahan and Jackson, who were thrilled by the news. As winter settled over the ranch, Temperance moved from her cabin into the main house, though they maintained separate bedrooms to preserve some semblance of propriety. The arrangement fooled no one. Of course, the ranch hands exchanged knowing glances whenever Nathan and Temperance were together, which was increasingly often. Christmas brought a rare few days of leisure as work on the ranch slowed. Nathan surprised Temperance with a proper engagement ring, a delicate gold band set with a small diamond that had belonged to his mother. "It's beautiful," Temperance breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. "It suits you," Nathan replied, his eyes warm with affection. "Simple, elegant, and stronger than it appears." The new year brought plans for their shared future. They spent evenings discussing improvements to the ranch house, adding rooms for children they hoped to have, expanding the kitchen to better accommodate Mrs. Callahan's cooking. In late January, however, their peaceful existence was disrupted by an unexpected visitor. Temperance was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard the sound of an approaching carriage. Looking out the window, she saw a sleek black coach pull up in front of the house, far more elegant than anything typically seen in this part of Arizona. A tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit emerged, surveying the ranch with obvious disdain. Something about his bearing, the set of his shoulders, was eerily familiar. Nathan emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. Even from a distance, Temperance could see the shock on his face as he recognized the visitor. "Who is that?" Mrs. Callahan asked, joining Temperance at the window. "I don't know," Temperance replied, though a suspicion was forming in her mind. The two men spoke briefly outside before Nathan led the visitor into the house. Temperance smoothed her apron nervously, wondering if she should retreat to her room, but it was too late. The kitchen door swung open and Nathan entered with the stranger. "Temperance," Nathan said, his voice strained. "This is my father, Edward Zephyr." The older man's cold blue eyes, so like his son's in color, yet so different in expression, assessed Temperance from head to toe. "So this is the woman I've heard so much about." "Mr. Zephyr," Temperance greeted him with a curtsy, suddenly acutely aware of her simple dress and work-reddened hands. "Welcome to the ranch." "Father is passing through on his way to San Francisco," Nathan explained, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "He'll be staying the night." The evening that followed was excruciating. Edward Zephyr made no effort to hide his disapproval of Temperance, addressing his comments exclusively to Nathan or Mrs. Callahan during dinner, as if Temperance were invisible. After the meal, the men withdrew to Nathan's study with glasses of whiskey. Temperance busied herself cleaning up, trying not to think about what they might be discussing. When she finally retired to her room, she sat by the window, watching the light from the study and wondering if her presence in Nathan's life was about to cost him his relationship with his father. Near midnight, a soft knock at her door announced Nathan's arrival. His face was drawn with fatigue and tension as he entered, closing the door behind him. "I'm sorry about today," he said, sinking onto the edge of her bed. "My father can be difficult." "He doesn't approve of me," Temperance said. "It wasn't a question." "No," Nathan admitted, but his approval isn't necessary. Temperance joined him on the bed, taking his hand. "What did he say to you?" Nathan hesitated. "Nothing worth repeating, please, I need to know." Nathan sighed heavily. "He said I was making the same mistake Annabelle made, letting my baser instincts cloud my judgment." His voice hardened. "He said no son of his would marry a whore." The word struck Temperance like a physical blow. "Oh." "I told him if he ever used that word again to describe you, he was no father of mine." Nathan's grip on her hand tightened. "I meant it, Temperance. I won't let anyone speak about you that way, especially not him." Temperance leaned against his shoulder, both heartbroken and deeply touched by his defense of her. "I don't want to come between you and your family." "You're my family now," Nathan said firmly. "You and whatever children we may have. My father made his choice years ago when he drove Annabelle away. I won't let him do the same to us." Edward Zephyr departed early the next morning without saying goodbye to Temperance. As his carriage disappeared down the road, Nathan put his arm around her waist. "Are you all right?" he asked. Temperance nodded, though in truth, the encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. "I just hope you won't regret standing up to him for my sake." "Never," Nathan vowed, pressing a kiss to her temple. February brought a brief thaw, and with it, an invitation that neither of them expected. The mayor of the nearest proper town, Red Rock, was hosting a Valentine's Day social to raise funds for a new schoolhouse. To their surprise, Nathan and Temperance were specifically invited. "We don't have to go," Nathan said when the invitation arrived. "It might be uncomfortable." Temperance understood his concern. This would be their first public appearance as a couple in respectable society. News of their engagement had surely spread by now. "I think we should go," she said, surprising herself with her resolve. "We can't hide forever, and I won't let fear dictate how we live our lives." The night of the social, Temperance wore her finest dress, a deep blue silk that Nathan had ordered for her from a dressmaker in Tucson. Her hair was arranged in an elegant knot, adorned with a silver comb that had belonged to Nathan's mother. "You look beautiful," Nathan said as he helped her into the carriage. "So do you," she replied, admiring how handsome he looked in his formal black suit. It was a far cry from his usual practical ranch attire. The social was being held in the town's newly constructed hotel, its ballroom festooned with red and white decorations for the holiday. As their carriage pulled up, Temperance's courage nearly failed her. What if people snubbed them? What if her presence embarrassed Nathan? As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan squeezed her hand. "Together," he said simply. They entered the ballroom to the undisguised curiosity of the assembled townspeople. Conversations faltered, heads turned, and for one terrible moment, Temperance thought they might be asked to leave. Then Mayor Wilson approached, his wife on his arm, and extended his hand to Nathan. "Mr. Zephyr, so glad you could join us. And this must be Miss Valentine." "We've heard so much about you, my dear." Mrs. Wilson smiled warmly. "Indeed we have. It's not every day our community welcomes such a talented new member. I understand you've been teaching several of the ranch children to read." Temperance blinked in surprise. This was not the reception she had anticipated. "Yes, that's right, just informally. We could use someone with your skills at our new school," the mayor's wife continued. "Perhaps you'd consider taking on a more official role once you're settled as Mrs. Zephyr." The conversation continued pleasantly, with other guests gradually approaching to be introduced. There were a few cold shoulders and disapproving glances, particularly from some of the older ladies, but overall, the reception was far warmer than Temperance had dared to hope. Later, as she and Nathan waltzed across the floor, Temperance finally relaxed enough to enjoy the evening. "I can't believe how kind everyone is being," she murmured. Nathan's eyes crinkled with amusement. Did you think we were the first couple in Arizona territory with an unconventional beginning? Half the women here came as mail-order brides. The banker's wife was a saloon singer in Tombstone. Out here, what matters is who you are now, not who you were. As the night drew to a close, Mayor Wilson called for attention to make an announcement about the fundraising total. While the crowd was distracted, Nathan led Temperance out onto the hotel's balcony, where the February air was crisp, but not uncomfortable. "I have something for you," he said, withdrawing a small package from his pocket. "A Valentine's gift." Temperance unwrapped it to find a delicate gold locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of Nathan on one side, with space on the other that was currently empty. "For our future," he explained. "Perhaps someday a picture of our child will fill that space." Tears pricked at Temperance's eyes as she closed the locket and let Nathan fasten it around her neck. "It's perfect," she whispered. Under a sky full of stars, with the sounds of the social continuing inside, Nathan pulled her close for a kiss that promised a lifetime of such moments, quiet, perfect. Theirs. Spring came early to the valley that year. By mid-March, wildflowers were already carpeting the meadows around the ranch, and preparations for the wedding began in earnest. Nathan's Aunt Elizabeth arrived from California, bringing his 2 young cousins and trunks full of supplies for the celebration. Aunt Elizabeth proved to be as warm and accepting as Edward Zephyr had been cold and judgmental. She embraced Temperance immediately, declaring, "Anyone who can put that light back in my nephew's eyes is family to me." With her help, the main house and grounds were transformed for the wedding. Flowers adorned every surface, tables were arranged under the large oak trees for the reception, and a dance floor was constructed near the barn. The day before the wedding, however, brought an unexpected challenge. Temperance was in her room making final adjustments to her wedding dress when a ranch hand knocked urgently at the door. "Miss Valentine, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." Temperance followed him to the porch, where a young woman was waiting, her clothes dusty from travel, her eyes red from crying. "Are you Temperance Valentine?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, I am. How can I help you? My name is Lucy Palmer. I worked with you at the Gilded Cage." The woman glanced around nervously. "I've run away and I didn't know where else to go. They say you found freedom here." Temperance's heart went out to the girl, who couldn't be more than 19. "Come inside. You look exhausted." Over tea in the kitchen, Lucy explained her situation. She had fled the Gilded Cage after a particularly brutal encounter with a client stealing money from Madame Rosaline's safe to fund her escape. "She'll be looking for me," Lucy concluded fearfully. "I don't know what to do." The timing couldn't have been worse, with the wedding just a day away and the ranch full of preparations and guests. Yet Temperance couldn't turn her back on someone in the same desperate situation she had once faced. "You can stay here tonight," she decided. "Tomorrow, after the wedding, we'll figure out a more permanent solution." When Nathan returned from town, where he'd been collecting the minister who would perform the ceremony, Temperance explained the situation. "Of course she can stay," Nathan agreed without hesitation. "We can set her up in your old cabin for now." Temperance's heart swelled with love for this man who understood without explanation why helping Lucy was so important to her. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for basic decency," Nathan replied, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "Now go get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Temperance stood at the window of her room watching the sun rise over the mountains, hardly able to believe that by sunset she would be Nathan Zephyr's wife. Aunt Elizabeth and Mrs. Callahan helped her dress in her wedding gown, a creation of ivory silk and delicate lace that had been ordered from San Francisco. Her hair was adorned with fresh flowers, and around her neck hung the locket Nathan had given her. "You look like an angel," Lucy breathed from the doorway, where she had come to help with the final preparations. "Indeed she does," Aunt Elizabeth agreed, adjusting the veil. "Nathan won't be able to take his eyes off you." The ceremony was held under the ancient oak tree that dominated the ranch's front yard. Guests had arrived from all over the territory, neighbors, business associates, and friends Nathan had made over the years. Even Mayor Wilson and his wife had made the journey from Red Rock. As Temperance walked toward the oak, where Nathan waited with the minister, she felt as though she were floating. The man she loved watched her approach, his face alight with joy and pride. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotion. Temperance remembered the warmth of Nathan's hands holding hers, the sincerity in his voice as he recited his vows, the weight of the gold band he slipped onto her finger. And then the minister was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Nathan was kissing her, and the gathered crowd was cheering. Mrs. Nathan Zephyr. The name echoed in her mind as they moved through the reception, accepting congratulations and well wishes. It still seemed impossible that this was her life now, married to a man she adored, mistress of a prosperous ranch, respected by the community. As the celebration continued into the evening, with dancing and feasting under lantern light, Temperance found herself watching Lucy, who was shyly dancing with one of the younger ranch hands. The girl's face was relaxed for the first time since her arrival, her fear momentarily forgotten in the joy of the occasion. Nathan followed her gaze. "Thinking about our next rescue mission?" he asked softly. Temperance turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I saw the way you looked at Lucy just now, the same way I imagine I looked at you that first day in Skidoo." He took her hand, rubbing his thumb over her wedding ring. "I was thinking, this ranch is plenty big. We could help more women like her, like you. You would do that?" Temperance asked, amazed once again by this man's capacity for compassion. "We would do that," Nathan corrected. "Together. This is your home too now, your ranch. If you want to use some of our resources to help others find their freedom, I'm all for it." Temperance kissed him, not caring who might see the public display of affection. "I love you, Nathan Zephyr." "And I love you, Temperance Zephyr." He grinned at the use of her new name. "Now, Mrs. Zephyr, I believe it's customary for the bride and groom to lead another dance." As they moved onto the dance floor, surrounded by friends and their makeshift family, Temperance realized that the journey that had begun with those fateful words, "You paid for me," now finish it, had led her not to an ending but to a beginning. Nathan had indeed offered her freedom, but what they had found together was something even more precious: love, purpose, and a future brighter than either could have imagined alone. In the years that followed, the Zephyr Ranch became known not only for its fine cattle and horses, but also as a haven for women seeking a fresh start. The cabin where Temperance had first lived was joined by others, creating a small community where women learned practical skills, healed from their pasts, and eventually moved on to independent lives throughout the territory. Lucy Palmer was the first of many. After several months at the ranch, she moved to Tucson, where she found work as a seamstress. Others followed, women escaping abusive marriages, former brothel workers, widows with no means of support. Some stayed only briefly, while others remained for years, becoming part of the extended Zephyr family. Nathan and Temperance's own family grew as well. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived a year after their wedding. He was followed by twin girls, Elizabeth and Anna, named for Nathan's aunt and sister. A fourth child, another boy they called Thomas, completed their family 5 years after their marriage. The children grew up surrounded by love and the unique community their parents had created. They learned early that people deserve to be judged by their character, not their circumstances, a lesson reinforced by the diverse group of people who pass through their lives. Edward Zephyr never reconciled with his son, a source of sadness for Nathan, but one he accepted as the price of the life he'd chosen. When news came of the elder Zephyr's death in 1883, Nathan traveled alone to San Francisco for the funeral, returning with a portion of his father's considerable fortune, which he immediately dedicated to expanding their work helping women in need. Temperance never returned to Skidoo. When Madame Rosaline died in 1884, the brothel closed, the building eventually becoming a general store. The past was behind her, though she never forgot where she had come from or how close she had come to a very different fate. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan surprised Temperance with a trip to San Francisco, a city she had always dreamed of visiting. They stayed in a grand hotel, attended the opera, and walked arm in arm through streets more cosmopolitan than anything in Arizona territory. On their last night in the city, as they stood on their hotel balcony watching ships in the harbor, Nathan gave her a small box containing a new locket to replace the one he'd given her before their wedding. This one was larger, with space for 4 tiny photographs, one for each of their children. "10 years ago you said I paid for you," Nathan murmured, his arms around her waist. "But the truth is, I'm the one who's been paid beyond measure. You've given me a life I never dreamed possible." Temperance leaned back against him, watching the sun set over the Pacific. "We've given that to each other," she corrected, "and to so many others." By 1896, 20 years after Nathan had first offered Temperance her freedom on that ridge overlooking the valley, the Zephyr Ranch had helped over 50 women start new lives. Their own children were nearly grown. James was studying law in California. The twins were teaching at the Red Rock School, and young Thomas was learning the ranching business from his father. Nathan's hair was now more silver than dark, and lines etched Temperance's face, but their love had only deepened with time. On warm evenings, they still sat together on the porch, watching the sunset just as they had in those early, uncertain days of their relationship. "You ever regret it?" Temperance asked one such evening, her head resting on Nathan's shoulder. "Taking a chance on me?" Nathan's laugh was warm against her hair. "Never, not for a single moment." He squeezed her hand. "Do you? You could have chosen the road to Tucson that day." Temperance smiled, thinking of all that had transpired in the 20 years since she'd made that choice. "I chose the right path," she said softly. "I chose freedom, and it led me home." As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the valley in gold just as it had that first day, Temperance reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her here from a desperate young woman trapped in servitude to the respected matriarch of a thriving ranch and a beacon of hope for women throughout the territory. It had begun with a cowboy who had paid for her, but offered her freedom instead. What neither of them could have known then was that in giving her a choice, Nathan had set them both free to build a life of purpose, compassion, and above all, love.